enough food for the whole tribe, what they would do is commit cannibalism, which means they used to eat the flesh of those who had just died. When you ask them why you do this, they say that life is the most important thing. So therefore we have to stay alive for as long as possible. These old people who have just died have lived their lives, so they want to give a chance to the younger people. Because if they remain in the tribe, the food wouldn't be enough for the whole tribe to live on. So therefore, to give opportunity, to give a chance to the younger generation, they would commit suicide. And they would willingly eat the flesh of those people who could be their uncles or the mothers or the fathers, because they want to save life. In other words, this for them is good. They use their minds. When they use their minds, not what Allah said, they come to this conclusion. For us, this is something which is disgusting. How many of you could eat the flesh of your father who just died? Or your mother, or your child? For us, it is something which we can't accept. But this is for them what they thought to be good. Because we all recognize that if we use our minds, everyone is different. What you might like, I might dislike. And what I like, you might dislike. People aren't all of the same intelligence. You have some people who are very intelligent. You have some people who are very weak, intellectually. If you look in the West, for example, I'm from Britain, and we have political parties. If Labour becomes the government one day, it will have its own ideas of what is good. And it will change everything else. If they lose the next year, the next party, the Conservative, will throw away all the Labour ideas and bring their own ideas. In other words, life isn't stable. They change everything. If you look at the morals and what they used to think bad, now they think good. If you look at the divorce rates in the West, and the amount of sexual crimes, and the indecent behavior that you see in the West, this is the result of the mind. Because the mind doesn't work by itself. It is affected by your desires. And people's desires, if not controlled, will lead you into all sorts of indecency. So therefore, what is better? For people to be told, do whatever you like, when you like, how you like. Or for them to believe in the creator of all that exists. Because how can anyone deny that God exists? On what basis? Because once you deny that God exists, what is the meaning of life? What are we doing on this earth? How are we able to understand and to explain the creation around us? Some people refer to the Big Bang Theory and say that the world came together because in the very beginning there were two gases, and then these gases collided and exploded, and from this explosion there were atoms, and from these they were formed into stars, and from these planets emerged, and then we were created. The only point that you need to ask now is, where did these two gases in the beginning come from? Where did these two gases which collided come from? Because we know that nothing in existence makes itself. Not even the simplest molecules are able to form from themselves. So therefore, if we disbelieve in God, how are we able to answer these questions? How are we able to say, for example, the one who lives a righteous life, as opposed to someone who lives a very ruthful life, killing people, doing all sorts of bad things, that when they die they will go to the same place? Nowhere. How are we therefore able to reward those who do good? How are we able to punish those who do bad? All of these are fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves. And if you think very carefully, you will only come to one conclusion: that this world which works so perfectly, you never hear on the news that the moon rose 1 minute late, or even 1 second late. Even our watches and our clocks are timed by the movement of the moon and the sun. That is how precise they are. The manner in which the whole of creation is working uniformly. How are we able to explain these things? There is no other way. Just as you say that this building was made by builders, I say that this earth was made by a builder, and the sky was made by a builder, and those trees and the water and everything else was made by a builder. There is a very nice story concerning one of the scholars of Islam. His name is I forget his name, but he was one of the scholars of Islam. And some people came to him and said, we wish to discuss with you whether or not God exists. Abu Hanifa, his name was. They came to him and said, Abu Hanifa, we want to discuss with you whether or not God exists. Abu Hanifa thought for a moment and then said, I will meet you here tomorrow at a certain time, and then I will discuss with you this subject. So the next day came and the people came, but there was no Abu Hanifa. So they waited and they waited, and finally he arrived. And he told them, please forgive me for being late. The only reason that I am late is because where I live and where we are now, in between there is a river. When I came to this river this morning, I was unable to find a boat to bring me across. As I was thinking, how can I come across this river? A huge tree appeared from nowhere. And then this huge tree became a boat, all by itself. There was no boat builder, there was no carpenter. The whole tree became a boat all by itself. And then I came across on this boat. The people, when they heard this story, were amazed. They asked themselves, how can a tree become a boat by itself? It's impossible. And when Abu Hanifa saw how they were unable to understand his story, he said to them, if you are unable to accept a tree became a boat, how do you want me to accept that the sun made itself and came from nowhere, and the moon came from nowhere, and the sky and the earth and everything around you comes from nowhere? It is a very simple argument, but it is very effective, because the people were unable to answer him. If I told any of you that this came from nowhere, it just appeared there by itself, you would find this very hard to accept. So why is it when we look at the moon and the stars and the sky and the whole of nature and the whole of creation that our minds become stopped? It goes out for lunch. We don't use it. We say that it came by chance. It came by itself. It isn't a good argument. It isn't a good answer. So therefore we have to be truthful with ourselves. Because wouldn't it be terrible for us to die as unbelievers, and then for us to stand before Allah in the hereafter, to stand before God, and for God to say to us, I gave you a life on this earth, I gave you good health, I gave you a mind to understand good from bad. Many people came to you and told you about Islam, but you refused. You refused because you wanted to believe all of this came by chance, by mistake, by accident. How will you then be able to stand before your Lord and Creator and give an answer to Him? It is very difficult. No, it's impossible. Because for those people who disbelieve in God, their position is impossible. They aren't able to give answers to fundamental questions.